I had taken, emphasis on had, a somewhat reasonable vacation from multicasting, because Necromage was hard. Capital H-A-R-D, hard. Everything about it was an exercise in fortitude, and also futility. So, I've moved on to the next hardest thing, naturally, which is hard swapping. Or at least you would think it is harder. More on that later. Now, if you are really enamored with scrolling through your 10 spell slots to get to the one you need, you're just gonna love hard swapping, where you can scroll through a potentially far greater array of available spells at the fraction of the FP cost. Now, why would I go ahead and do any of this at all? Well, I wanted something that was a little easier than my usual fare, and usually using weapons and Ashes of War in this game tends to make things easier. But I kind of wanted to give it a twist, so we gave it a twist. And the twist was learn to do a fundamental invader tech that we should have known how to do for a very long time now, but we're reluctant to do, because increasing the technical skill ceiling to this point is daunting. That being said, it's really not that hard once you get the hang of it, and then on top of that, you have a million ways of making the muscle memory significantly easier to learn by arranging your inventory in specific ways, of which there are many, many videos on the topic, the most popular of which I'm sure as of now is BookOfMatches from Dark Souls 3. They have an excellent little video on inventory management, and then if you ever watch the content of obviously G9 or someone like NoName TryHard, you will see them use their well-adjusted and tuned inventories to pull off incredibly fast and smooth swaps. With overleveled phantoms being as strong as they are, it would only benefit you to have access to your entire possible arsenal of weapons. If you're a dex build and you're only using a katana, you're missing out on a lot of possible damage from a variety of other sources, like heavy thrusting swords, scythes that go through shields, twin blades. Don't forget twin blades. Not to mention the countless Ashes of War that absolutely break the game, by either having hitboxes that are far too large, or damage that is far too high, or some combination of the two. Usually a combination of the two. So having any of those of your choice at your disposal at any given moment is very valuable. In raising the technical skill ceiling of the game, you are participating in an act of self-balancing of the PvP itself, by engaging in an ecosystem where reds are determined by any means necessary to eliminate unsavory summoned cooperators. In order to bring the balance of the game back into alignment, you need to correctly assess, diagnose, and cure an overleveled of their life. And to do that, it will often require the use of a weapon that you are not currently holding, but could be holding at any moment. This is not intended to be educational, namely because this is not anything new. This is, for the most part, a documentation of the first few steps on my journey to uncovering a technique that I had been reluctant to learn for the longest time, and am now just willing to investigate. We're going to do a short sidebar. Making videos that are educational in any way is very odd to me because I do not feel like an authority on anything having to do with this game. I am very unwilling to approach the tippy top of metastrats and dueling practice because it does not appeal. I am bad at it, and the speed duration of fights is a little too quick to be worth anything. Also crouch pokes. Also poise from neutral? No thanks. I like some casual try-hard duels from time to time, but you will not see me entering tournaments unless it is out of boredom. They terrify me. Genuinely. I enter tournaments for other games, but I think I'm going to draw the line at Elden Ring. Alright, so I'm going to preface my poor justification for the way that I have organized my inventory by saying this. If you would like an actually good take on how to organize your inventory, please go watch NoName TryHard and BookOfMatches, and Affinity for that matter. They all use swapping excellently, all the time, usually. And they're better examples of how to actually use it effectively than I am. I'll try to put some links in the description. What I have done is try to evenly distribute types of options across my inventory so that it is seeded in such a way that you can easily reach a chase down or get off me option at any given moment from any given position. Granted, this didn't always work, and it was kind of chaotic, so that didn't actually ever work out, but that was the idea. Instead of a stable, muscle memory-oriented setup that can net maybe 13-ish weapons somewhat consistently, inventory seeding is a little more chaotic. The real benefit to this is that you can take advantage of the entire inventory space sans muscle memory right from the get-go, so it's at least good to get used to the idea of switching your weapons around. And I really wanted to get used to swinging with my weapon, thinking about it, opening my menu, and switching to a different weapon. That's all I wanted to get down for the first leg of this marathon. And this is only going to be the first video, maybe in a series of videos about this topic, and this is really just about as far as I got. I got very comfortable with having a lot of weapons, opening my inventory, and switching to a different weapon, even if it was sometimes at random. Now I know what you're thinking, won't this cause terrible bad habits that you will never recover from? Of course it will. But undoing those bad habits is part of the fun. Or rather, the surprise and shock of seeing new options every time I open my inventory is what keeps me engaged in the hard swapping to begin with. So the fact that it's kind of like a roulette wheel feeds into that enjoyment. I guess my idea was to make it more fun than practical. The obvious drawback is that it takes potentially seconds longer to switch to a desired option, but it's still relatively fast once you're familiar with the layout. Please bear in mind that this is just worse than having the muscle memory to swap to whatever you want, whenever you want. But as I've said, I'm starting out here after being an anti-swapper for most of my time prior, and this is a pretty good way to get accustomed to opening the menu. I had initially started out this journey on a sort of faith quality setup that let me take advantage of pretty much every single faith Ash of War in the game. This here is at 125, I believe, if not 133. And I invested a good chunk of mind to just keep using Ashes of War as I wished. The poise is somewhat negligible. It could be higher. I could have invested more in endurance. I decided not to, because it's just kind of a lowest common denominator feature of a lot of builds. It has poise. Oh, well, that's just kind of par for the course. So it doesn't have that much poise. But it does have miracles and holy water pots and perfume. Can't go invading without your perfume. For every invasion, I give myself a good spritz of Victoria's Secret Fearless, and that really gives me the confidence I need to brutally murder everyone. After the recent adjustments to Light Roll, I had begun to do my own a little investigation into whether or not it was any good. And here's what I found. For about 15% or more of your absorptions, you can Light Roll and Light Sprint, both of which are extremely useful for evasion, and approaching. You get substantially faster to the point where you can dash circles around medium rolling targets who have an extremely hard time catching up with you in chase down scenarios. You will somewhat frequently get one-shot by over-leveled phantoms, but to be completely honest, that was happening to me even before I put on the Light Roll, so it's not exactly new. The idea is to not get hit in the first place, or delete them with something sufficiently powerful. That or die. Which can be fun, a very, very fun way to play, but at the same time, better to armor and poise up to have that not happen. An easy fix for this is to be constantly popping Boiled Crab, which brings your physical absorptions back into line with a normal medium rolling build, while still having good elemental absorptions. Also, Quickstep and Bloodhound Step got a buff slash nerf slash readjustment to fix their nonsense evasion. Of the two of these, Quickstep enables you to remain more aggressive, while Bloodhound Step enables more passive play. Bloodhound Step is not a very engaging way to play unless you're using it as a burst approach option, which is an excellent reason to keep a soft swap dagger ready in the event that someone's just a little too far away for you to continue your chase step. You could always pop off a quick Bloodhound Step and then roll into them. And you'll be much closer than you were before, because it'll have been faster than just running. Quickstep, even before the slight changes, was always a very interesting Ash to me, because it let you stick to opponents while locked on, and avoid damage to keep up your pressure without faltering. Now it circles around locked on targets far better than before, sometimes even netting you free backstab opportunities, which is definitely something that I would hope people would be interested in. In 1v1 scenarios, it can be particularly deadly, since you can dodge almost any attack on reaction. In 1v3 and 1v2 scenarios, it can be somewhat less useful, owing to the fact that it does not yield particularly good escape speed, which is what you would be using Bloodhound Step for anyway. Now, for 15% more of your absorptions, functionally putting you into the negatives, you can have an absolutely absurd amount of roll invincibility for 3 minutes, with the Windy Crystal tier. Now, what is the opportunity cost of a light roll and the invincibility boost? Essentially, if you get hit, there's a chance that a Stray Ash of War will almost certainly one-shot you, which, when invading, is perfectly possible and likely pretty much all the time. However, for every situation you are aware of, and an invader should be focusing primarily on awareness before anything else, you have a substantially easier, more effective strategy for avoiding damage altogether. The Windy Crystal tier makes you 19% more evasive, while you take 15% more damage, which is a proportional 4% net gain, which isn't really how math works, but let's pretend like it does. It relies on you dodging correctly, but when dodging correctly, you are gaining almost 20% worth of effective evasion in that instance. Effective damage mitigation being here the overall ability of your character to statistically avoid the total amount of damage that is levied at them. If you do get hit, which is likely, you might die, but the idea is that you're getting hit a lot less. Now, if you're primarily spending FP on Quickstep to dodge, then this seems kind of redundant, so using them together may not make a whole lot of sense. But Quickstep will keep you facing a target, and rolling is free, so using them together is not really terrible in theory. From this point to the end of the video, I will be showing clips and providing commentary on some of the swap plays that I actually thought were quite good, after I had been messing around with it for a few days. For my light roll build, this is a 72 plus 17 dexterity build that makes most use of lightning-infused weapons. I decided that I would just kind of make an assortment of weapons and ashes that I wanted to use with no real particular thought except, you know, what fundamentally works well together, like Spin Slash Nagakiba, and a personal favorite of mine, Quickstep, great at pay, because I feel like it has a very well-balanced all-around moveset, so you can kind of initiate your invasion with that and then decide from there if you'd rather something beefier or something faster or something shorter or something longer, something with hyper armor, you know. Do I need a nuclear option? Am I trying to have fun here? What's the play? And this opened me up to trying a whole lot of interesting strategies that I would not have otherwise gone for, because I usually just don't open my menu in invasions unless I absolutely have to. I had something for everything, and if I really needed a nuclear option, I had the Hand of Melania in there ready to go at any point in time. And the Hand of Melania isn't even like the most nuclear option you could possibly go for. It's slow as shit and you can avoid it. As you can see here, our friends have opted for a passive invasion, as they have hit me with an Albinaric pot, so I had to play relatively safely until I could get one of my Estus off. I wasn't really about to contest 3-ish ultra weapons at once with no access to healing and light roll. I'm normally not one to use fan daggers either, because the regular throwing knives do fantastic damage on a dex build, but I had enough money to buy a bunch of them, and I wanted to see how effective they were at actually chasing down targets, and they're pretty effective, so I think I might have to keep them for the future. Or not. You could actually have to time your roll catch and use a regular throwing knife. And here I am just taking advantage of this poor host passivity to practice switching to a different weapon almost randomly, just to have some variety. And then the rest of this is just a lot of me fucking around, to be completely honest. Now this one is just utter chaos, because I have the advantage of these semi-invincible stone golem pieces and imps available for most of the invasion experience. I really like doing the swaps because it gives you this feeling of like flowing from weapon to weapon after a little while, and eventually you feel like you're just kind of throwing them to your side and just sort of picking up another one. Sometimes switching weapons just to switch weapons is in your best interest, even if you don't have a very clear plan for it. Then again, there's always the chance that you switch to something that is just not set for a specific situation. Like daggers, or whips. I guess any low enough poise damage weapon would be an issue to swap to. There are just so many interesting and good options within every build category, and even outside of certain build categories that can be accessed by everyone, kind of, and I mean that in like the Ashes of War. It just makes sense to be thinking like this in some capacity, even if it's not to this extreme level, or to the technical ceiling that has been shown by some of the more prolific invaders, and as was extremely common in Dark Souls 3, where, you know, swapping to Lidos specifically for the weapon art was a thing that happened more often than not. Same with Gundyrs, same with, I don't know, there really weren't a whole lot of them. But now it's infinitely better / worse, because the Ashes of War are infinitely better than weapon arts. But it's also worse because if you're just switching for those, then like what's the point? But also there are certain weapons that only have specific Ashes of War, like the Black Knife and the Hand of Melania, so you kind of need to be in that build to be able to use them. There is still some identity within. It's entirely up to the player to gut the identity of a given build, and, you know, people will optimize the fun out of things if they absolutely can. The restraint to not do that is impressive. At a certain point, though, I can't suffer through not doing enough damage to finish a phantom, so I have a tendency to optimize the fun out of some things, sometimes. There's nothing wrong with wanting a build that can win. There is something wrong with wanting a build that only wins. At that point, you don't want a game. You want a novel. You want a movie. You want an interactive experience. You're not so much interested in the journey so much as the destination, and you know that you're always going to get there. This is mostly directed at the people that use the Dragon Breath spells and wait at the bottom of elevators with Mog's Spear. Like, yes, of course you're going to kill them. What else would happen? Anyone who wants to win in this game badly enough can and will. There are definitely ways to counter pretty much everything. That doesn't mean you should have to counter even a tiny fraction of some of the stuff you have to put up with. So don't. Tailor your invading experience. Be as strong or as weak as you like. Block people that are assholes. Do it liberally. There's no end to this. There is no final goal. There is no reward. There is no pot of gold at the end of the tunnel. No one's gonna think less of you because you blocked a shitter. This is advice that I myself am not taking anymore for some reason, because I decided that I would rather throw myself at the same nonsense gank 16 times than block them at this point. And this especially doesn't make sense, because now with the Wex Dust, any place that's particularly bad for invading can be a gank location. There are some particularly nasty ones, like the little hallway before Rykard, and also the little hallway before the Magma Worm, and also the little hallway before the Erdtree. I think you're noticing a trend. It is more likely than not that you will, for a percentage of your invasions, spawn in a tiny, tiny room surrounded by people with colossal weapons, all crouch poking you simultaneously. Admittedly very erotic, but not at all consensual. The Beastclaw Great Hammer is really what sold me on this Faith build. It is mostly a strength weapon. Or it's actually kind of split halfway between, but the weapon art on this thing is huge. It's just nice and chunky, roll catches, does 900 damage. It combos into omens. What more could you possibly want from it? I like this invasion a lot because I feel like it shows a lot of the different things that you can accomplish in a small space of time by swapping. So there I just killed someone who didn't have enough health and should have leveled their vigor more with the big fiery blast laser weapon art of the Rykards. And then I switched to the spear here to try to annoy them a bit and, you know, get them into this perfumer, which they have now done. I cleanse myself of the rot, and I look to switch to something larger that can hit through walls, and I notice I have my Devourer Scepter, which has a large hitbox that is not particularly damaging on this build because we're not running the Fire Up Physic or anything like that. But it is doing a relatively good job of poking through this wall, which is something that I'm slowly beginning to appreciate more and more and more as time goes on. And then after I had done that for a bit, I switched to the Golden Order Greatsword because I knew we would be fighting in closer quarters, and this does a very chunky burst damage as you're going along. And now I've decided that I'm going to hit through walls and around corners again, but with Marika's hammer. And then I realized that if I get any kind of hit, I can just kind of like do a roll catch with the weapon art, but here I get a backstab, and then I roll catch with the Marika's hammer. Which is a thing you can do, by the way. I think the theme of this Quality Faith build was giant hitboxes, just absolutely slamming my way through hosts and phantoms alike. It started off as more dexterity Faith-oriented, and then it gradually over time became more quality as I figured out some of the strength Faith options that I really wanted to use. I definitely can't recommend Faith quality enough because you just get so many really, really cool Ashes of War that you wouldn't have access to otherwise. And they are very oddly spread in stats, like especially the Blasphemous Blade, which is not really something that I used a whole lot, but I did occasionally. But I like the Gargoyle Black Blade, which is like a harder version of that to land, and it does the Destined Death effect. And then there's the Black Blade, which is just great on its own, and served very well as a damaging, look, I know you're there, I see you, you're gonna have to do something now. I will admit that I did use the very funny Shard of Alexander on this build, but if I were to do it now, I probably wouldn't even really need it, especially because the damage is split between 3 different types on most of the ashes, between holy, physical, and fire, so it didn't even really serve that much of a purpose anyway, but to make the holy damage absolutely nuclear. But then this Moonveil attack happens, and I don't feel so bad anymore. The moral of the story is, use the Shard of Alexander if you feel like it. Actually, you could do pretty much anything if you feel like it, no one's gonna stop you. We've said it once, we'll say it again. This is the Wild West. And, you don't really have to pretend like you're in the East anymore. So pick a damage stat and cram every single weapon that you could fit onto a build into that build. And then go at it, I guess. I shouldn't be giving advice on this. Take care, everyone, and happy swapping.